My name is Rachel Turner. I am 38 years old. I worked as a nurse for many years. I raised one child by myself, my daughter Emily. Emily is 22 now. She is loud, bright, and proud. She loves music and laughs like fireworks. People say she looks like me. Sometimes she does. Sometimes she looks like the daughter she dreamed of being. One night, everything broke. My daughter screamed, "You ruined my life," and threw my suitcase outside. I quietly picked it up and walked away. The house smelled like coffee and anger. The living room light was on. Emily stood by the door with her face hot and her eyes wet. She had a paper cup in her hand and it trembled. Her voice broke like glass. The neighbors could hear if they were listening. I saw the suitcase on the porch, lying in the wet leaves, the zipper open, clothes spilling out like small secrets. For a long time I did not move. Part of me wanted to shout back. Part of me wanted to beg. Part of me wanted to go inside and explain everything. But all I did was bend down and pick up my suitcase. My hands were steady. My face was calm. I could feel the wind pushing past us like a cold hand. Emily slammed the door and walked away with angry steps. I walked to my old car. I closed the trunk. I did not cry. I could feel my heart pounding, but I kept my face quiet because children need anchors, even when they break the anchor. I left before midnight. My breath fogged in the cold. I drove to a small motel by the highway. I slept on one small bed and I thought of the first time I held Emily as a baby. Her tiny fingers wrapped around mine and her whole future fit in my arms like a fragile bird. I could not imagine how my suitcase on the porch became a war. I thought about the fight. It began with money. It began with my ex-husband, David. That man had left years ago and he took more than money. He took hope. He had promised to help when Emily was little. He promised to be a father. He promised to be a good man. He was not those things. When Emily was 10, David stopped answering calls. He stopped sending money. I learned to mend torn shoes and fix broken toys. I learned to cook cheap food that would fill empty stomachs and tired hearts. I worked nights at the hospital and days cleaning houses. The town knew me as a steady worker. People nodded when they saw me in the grocery store. I smiled back. Inside, I carried a tired, soft ache. Emily grew. She grew like wind. She wanted more than bills and bread. She wanted a life that was bright and certain. She wanted to go to college and move far away and wear silk skirts. I did everything I could. I borrowed. I skipped treatments so I could pay a tuition fee. I prayed in the dark. I made lunchboxes that smelled like love. When Emily turned 18, she left the small town for a good college. She flourished. She made friends. She learned new words. She learned how to drink coffee that tasted like the future. I cried at graduation and smiled until my face hurt. Then, the trouble started again. 2 years ago, Emily met a man named Mark. He drove a nice car and wore nice shirts and had a laugh that filled rooms. At first, I liked him. He brought flowers and jokes. He said the right things. People fall for charm, I knew that. I told Emily to be careful, but she said I worried too much. Mark and Emily moved in together. He found a job in the city and Emily stayed in school. For a while things were happy. I called and spoke with Emily about the smallest things: a test, a sandwich, a fight with a friend. She sent pictures of her new apartments and pets and she sounded proud. Then the phone calls slowed. Bills came. I reached into pockets that had less and less. Little by little I noticed strange messages on my bank account. I would transfer money for rent like any mother would. Then more money would disappear. I thought it was the bank's error. I thought it was a misread number. My fingers shook over the phone when I called the bank. I learned a new kind of fear when a bank teller said the words, "There is a series of transfers to an outside account." The amount was not small. It was a number that made my eyes swim. I asked for a paper printout. The paper smelled like fluorescent lights and worry. Who would take money from my account? I signed my name on every check so no one else could pay bills in my name. Or so I thought. I asked Emily if she had seen the transfers. She said no. I asked her to check her accounts. She said she would. That night she sent a voice message saying she was busy. I fell asleep on the couch with the phone in my hand like a small guardian. Then another strange thing happened. One afternoon, a man came to the house. He was polite, but his eyes were sharp like a bird. He had letters in his hand and a badge on his belt that read, "Collection Agent." He showed me forms and told me someone had signed an agreement to authorize withdrawals from my account. He left the paper on my table like a warning. I read it until the ink blurred. The paper had Emily's name on it. She had signed a form, or someone had signed in her name, authorizing transfers. The agent said it was legal. I asked him if he was sure. He smiled like he owned the world and said, "We only follow what is signed." My world grew thin like old bread. I called Emily. Her voice was small on the phone. She said she did not remember signing anything. She said the money was for an apartment that had appliances and candles and a new life. I told her I would check. I told her to be careful. She said, "Fine, Mom, I am fine." Then, one night, I saw a message on Emily's phone when she left it on the table. It was from Mark. The message said, "Make sure your mom signs today. I will take care of the rest." The words made a cold core in my stomach. I remembered Mark's laugh, too loud sometimes like a curtain being ripped. I remembered the ways he would look at me when he visited, like he measured me and found me wanting. I remembered Emily, laughing and not seeing the small seams that made him dangerous. The newspaper had an article once about scams where lovers ask for access to money. I read it like a manual for fear. I checked account history and found dates that matched the times Mark visited. The same man who said he loved Emily was in the paper for credit card theft in a city 2 hours away. I cut the number from the page and held it like proof. I wanted to run to Emily and tell her everything: the prints, the papers, the agent, the old article with Mark's name. But I knew how it feels to be young and in love. I also knew how people close to danger often cannot see it. I tried to show her. She would close the door on my face like a curtain. She would say, "You don't understand him, Mom," and the door would click. Then, money vanished again. My savings that I kept for rainy days, for doctor visits, and small surprises evaporated the way steam lifts off a kettle. The collection agents called more politely and then less politely. I found my name plastered on a demand letter. I borrowed from relatives, but their cupboards were bare too. I sold a few things: an old lamp, a photograph, but that only made the nights longer. Emily cut off calls for a week. She would not answer. I left voicemails like paper boats floating on a river of silence. I went to her apartment once, but Mark opened the door. He smiled too broad and said, "Rachel, so nice to see you." I felt eyes like pinpricks and I turned away. One late night, I drove to her apartment with a bag of soup and a stomach like a hollow cave. The hallway smelled of bleach. When I knocked, the door opened and Mark stood there as if he expected me. He invited me in with too many words. I held my soup like a shield. Emily was on the couch, her face tired. Mark told me about his new job. He talked fast. He held Emily's hand and said, "We are building a life." I watched Emily and I did not recognize the person in front of me. Her face was pale and she thanked me softly before she went to her bedroom. I whispered that I loved her. She kissed my cheek and said, "Mom, you worry too much." I left in the dark with my soup growing cold. I felt foolish for thinking I could open her eyes with papers and truth. I felt foolish for thinking love would always protect us. Weeks passed. Bills grew. I borrowed again. The bank called like an alarm clock that would not stop. One morning I found a notice that said, "Account closed due to unauthorized transfers." I called the bank. The woman on the line apologized and said there was nothing they could do without a police report. I filed one. The police were kind but slow. "We will look into it," they said. I felt like waiting was teeth being pulled slowly. One night, a letter slipped under my door. The envelope had no return address. Inside was a small photograph. It was of Mark and another woman smiling in a diner, their hands close on the table. The photograph was not old. It had sugar on the woman's lips and a ring on Mark's finger. The ring flashed like a secret. I did not show Emily. I folded the picture and put it in my jacket pocket where the heart is. I wanted to rip the world apart and show her every small trail of truth. I wanted to wake her up like a child who had slept through a storm. Then, the explosion. It was a Sunday afternoon and the house was quiet. I was folding laundry. The phone rang. It was the collection agent again. I told him I was working and I had no money. He used the sort of voice that makes people feel small. I hung up and sat on the floor with the laundry like a soft island. Emily arrived early that evening. She was carrying grocery bags and hummed a song I knew from her childhood. When she reached the door, she froze. Her face changed. Her hands shook. She set the bags down and looked at me as if she saw a stranger. "Mom," she said softly, "I need to tell you something." Her voice was thin like a twig. I sat up. "What is it, honey?" I asked. She told me Mark had asked her to sign some papers. He said they were for a joint account for their future. He said it would help them buy a small place. He said it would be fine. She had signed without reading carefully because she trusted him. She said she wanted to surprise him. She said she loved him. My hands tightened on the laundry. I thought of the earlier papers. I thought of the bank. I thought of the collection agent and the photograph. I reached into my bag and pulled out the printout from the bank. I handed it to Emily. Her eyes scanned, her pupils like coins. I watched her face go through the colors of weather, confusion, doubt, anger. She slammed the paper on the table. "This is a mistake," she said. "He would never do this." I opened my mouth. I wanted to say everything. I wanted to tell her about the photograph, about the phone calls, about the bank agent, about the article with Mark's name. I wanted to shout the word liar like a bell. But I did not. Instead, I asked, "Did he ever ask you to sign a power of attorney or an access form?" She said no. That night we talked until late. We sat like two people on a small raft in a storm. Emily cried. She called Mark and his phone rang and went to voicemail. She paced and told me she loved him and trusted him. I told her I loved her and I trusted her too, but I could not trust people who asked for other people's money. I did not mean to make her feel small, but she felt wounded. She had already fought to be independent, and no one likes to be told they were wrong. The next morning, I went home to the motel with my head heavy. I knew I had to do something. I called the police again and asked them to look into the transfers. I called the bank and asked for all paperwork. I borrowed from a friend and paid a bill. Little by little, I stitched the holes in the net. Then a day came that washed everything away. Emily found a receipt on the kitchen table. The receipt was for a flower shop. It had Mark's name and a small note, "To Emily, from Mark." Beside the note was another paper, a small bank slip with a signature that looked like Emily's, but a little too smooth, almost practiced. She stared at the slip, and it was like watching a fragile bridge bend and then snap. "Who signed this?" she asked, her voice small. I went quiet. I wanted to tell her now, in that instant, because her eyes looked like glass beads ready to fall. I wanted to show her the photograph, the article, the bank printout. I wanted to wrap truth around her like a shawl. Instead, I said, "I don't know, Emily. But we will find out." She picked up her purse and stormed out. The door slammed. The house felt like an empty shell. I stayed behind and sat at the kitchen table. I felt the room shrink. I felt tiredness like a heavy blanket. I made a cup of tea and let the steam blur my vision. I wrote down the places I needed to call, the people to see, the steps to take. It felt like a long list of small battles. That evening, Emily returned with a new hardness in her eyes. She carried a stack of envelopes and tossed them on the table. Her hands shook. "These are from my bank," she said. "They sent me letters about transfers. And look," she held up a notice with charges. "They say I authorized withdrawals for months." We read them together. The paper had the dates. The amounts were large. The bank stamp said, "Authorization on file." Emily's eyes watered again, but now there was anger in them like a flame. "You lied to me," she said to the air, her voice small and fierce. I felt my own chest tighten. I wanted to press my palm to her heart and make the hurt leave. Then, she did something I did not expect. She crumpled her fists and threw over her shoulder the suitcase that had been by the bed. It hit the door and burst open, and clothes and papers tumbled into the hallway like a small, messy confession. She screamed the words I will never forget. "You ruined my life." Her voice was raw. In an instant, the world changed. I stood up and bent slowly and picked up the suitcase. The zipper was broken and an old scarf fell into my hands. I looked at Emily. She was shaking. She cried and shouted, and then, without another word, she went out into the night. The door slammed. The house echoed. I walked to the door and listened. The neighborhood was quiet. Somewhere a car passed like a distant thought. The moon was a thin coin. I set the suitcase on the back seat of my car and I started the engine. I wanted to follow her, to catch her in my arms and tell her that I would fix it. But a small voice in me whispered that sometimes the best thing is to let the storm run its course. People must face what they have done and feel the full heat of truth before they can soften. I drove to the motel again. I sat in the car and looked at the suitcase. I thought of the years of knitting small joys for Emily, lunches, bedtime stories, scraped knees. I thought of the nights I worked while she slept, of the promises I had made and broken. I thought of times when I had failed her. I thought of Mark. The next morning, as sunlight spilled over the parking lot, I found an envelope slid under the motel door. My name was on it in neat handwriting. My hand trembled when I picked it up. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a small photograph. The photograph showed Mark smiling with a woman beside him, not Emily. The paper had a note, "You deserve to know." No signature. No address. My heart stumbled. I read the words again and again, and then I called a number that belonged to a friend who knew about digital records. He said he would help. He said he could trace the transfers and find where the money went. I felt hope like a small bird in my chest. I told myself I would not break. I would get the proof, and then I would show Emily everything. I would show her who used her trust like a tool. I would mend the torn seams. But life is not quick to give answers. That evening, a neighbor's dog barked violently. There was shouting in the street. I stepped outside with my suitcase because I could not stay locked indoors while life shouted at the same volume as the dog. A car screeched. Tires squealed like knives. Someone shouted a name. I could see people running. I could see a figure in the distance. I squinted. For a moment, I thought it was Emily. My heart leapt so fast my breath blurred. Then the lights from a police car flashed red and blue, cutting the sky like thin ribbons. A voice called over a loudspeaker, asking everyone to stay back. My phone vibrated with a text, "Are you okay?" Sam. Sam was the friend tracing the transfers. I answered, my fingers cold. While I waited for his reply, a siren screamed close and then farther. I stood on the motel steps with my suitcase like a small island. Suddenly, a woman in a gray coat ran up to me and grabbed my arm. Her face was pale and she was out of breath. "Are you Rachel Turner?" she asked. I opened my mouth. My voice was small. "Yes." She handed me a paper and it read, "Your daughter was seen at the corner of Maple and 2nd. She was arguing with a man. Witnesses say the man pushed her. She fell. We called an ambulance." My knees felt like they left me. I dropped the suitcase. The world tilted. I wanted to run and wake up and find it was a bad dream. I wanted to find Emily laughing like fireworks. But the paper trembled in the woman's shaking hands like a map to a place I did not want to go. I ran. I ran toward the sound of sirens and the cluster of people. My breath was a storm in my chest. I reached Maple and 2nd and people parted like a sea. There, on the pavement, lay someone curled like a small animal. A white scarf was smeared with something dark. A man stood over her with his jaw tight and his hands held like he had done nothing wrong. For a moment the world stopped. I could see Emily's face. She was pale and her eyes were closed. The police shouted. Someone covered her body with a jacket. The man, it was Mark, looked at me and his face was blank. His hand was empty. I felt the suitcase on the ground under my fingertips, but I had no strength to pick it up. My knees hit the concrete and I watched hands lift Emily onto a stretcher. The sirens were loud and close now and the sky looked like a big blank sheet. I wanted to shout. I wanted to shake the man and tear him apart with words. I wanted to tell him he had ruined everything. But the words stuck in my throat like stones. As the ambulance doors closed, a woman in the crowd called out, "Someone saw Mark pass a small envelope to a neighbor and tell them to give it to Emily tomorrow." My heart twisted. An envelope? Tomorrow? How could tomorrow be important now when today was breaking? I felt a hot, sharp rage that was not mine alone, but all the mother's and daughter's rage stitched together. I stood up and I looked at Mark. His face held a small, thin fear. He tried to smile and his lips trembled. The police took statements. Lights flashed. Emily was gone in the ambulance, sirens mourning into the distance. People stared. Someone handed me a paper towel and I pressed it to my mouth because my lungs felt full of glass. I heard a neighbor say she fainted after reading the letter. But which letter? When? Who gave it? My head spun. I needed to know. I needed proof. I needed to bring every paper and every photograph and every small truth into the light. I needed to tell Emily, when she woke, who had betrayed her and why. I needed to stitch kindness back into the place her trust had been ripped away. As the ambulance disappeared down the road, I held my broken suitcase like a small promise. I did not know what the next day would bring. I only knew that I had to find answers. I felt a strange and heavy understanding that this was bigger than money. It was about trust. It was about who uses love to hide a blade. The sky turned dark and the night closed around me like a book. I stood at the curb and watched, and somewhere in the quiet an envelope waited on a doorstep, a secret folded tight, a small thing that would make a woman faint and change everything. I clutched the suitcase and whispered to the night, "Emily, I will find the truth." Then everything went quiet except for my own heartbeat, loud and steady, a drum that would not stop until I knew the whole story. The chapter ends here on the sound of the ambulance fading away and a cold wind flipping the lid of my suitcase open, as if even the wind wanted to read what was inside. The ambulance doors slid open and the hospital smelled like clean air and bright lights. Nurses moved quickly, like a team of careful birds. I followed, but at a distance, because the police told me to stay back. My legs felt like jelly. My suitcase lay in the gutter where I had dropped it, its zipper open, a scarf half out like a small flag. They put Emily on a bed and wheeled her down a long hallway. Her face was white, and she did not move much. A nurse held her hand and told her, in a soft voice, that she was safe. I could hear machines begin to breathe for her. The beeps were slow at first, then steady. A doctor with tired eyes and clean gloves said they would run tests and keep her overnight. He used words like concussion and observation. He said she had fainted and that fainting can come from many things: shock, a sudden drop in blood pressure, extreme stress. My head felt thick. I kept thinking about the small paper someone had said was on her doorstep. The police officer who had taken statements had muttered that someone saw Mark give a small envelope to a neighbor and whisper for them to leave it for Emily. The neighbor was sure Mark said, "Give it to her tomorrow." Who would do that? Who would plan a tomorrow that caused a fall today? The nurse put a warm blanket on Emily and smoothed her hair. I stood beside the bed and touched her hand. Her skin was cool. I kept telling myself she would open her eyes and smile and say, "You worry too much," like she always did. But the room felt too quiet for that smile to come right away. That night I slept in a chair by her bed. My eyes kept closing and then opening. I watched the machines keep time like small, patient clocks. Once, Emily stirred and her eyelids twitched. She said one word in a tiny voice, "Envelope." Then she stopped. Her lips moved as if something was walking in her head. I wanted to hold her and tell her everything I knew. I wanted to tear Mark's shirts and dig up all the papers. I wanted to be the kind of mother who could fix anything with one hug. But some things do not fix with hugs. Some things need proof and patience and careful walking steps like threads back into a torn sweater. The doctor came in the morning. He explained tests. He said Emily's fainting might be from shock and that they found nothing dangerous in her head. He recommended rest, fluids, and time. He looked at me and said gently, "She will wake. When she does, keep questions simple. Too much talking can confuse someone who is recovering. Simple questions." Sounded like the doctor spoke a different language from the one that roared inside my bones. Emily woke at noon. Her eyes opened slowly like sunrise. She looked around and for a moment she did not know where she was. Then she saw me and I felt the air leave my body. She tried to speak, but her mouth made only a small sound. The nurse gave her a small cup of water, and she sipped like a tired bird. "Mom?" Her voice was thin. Her fingers closed around mine. "I'm here," I said. "I'm here." She closed her eyes. "What happened?" she asked. "You fainted," I said. "You were found on the sidewalk. The ambulance brought you in." She frowned. "The envelope," she said. Her voice was small and urgent. There was an envelope on my doorstep. I read it. I fell. My heart did a strange, tight flip. "What did it say?" I asked, though I already feared the answer. She swallowed. Her hands trembled. "It had a picture," she said. "And a note." The picture was of Mark with a woman. The woman had a ring on her finger. The note said, "Truth." Her breath hitched. But the picture was old. Why would someone send it now? I read it and I don't know. My head felt like it would break. She began to cry in small, quiet sobs. The sound made my chest ache. I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to make the pain stop. But the doctor's words came back. "Keep questions simple." "Do you remember reading more?" I asked. "Did it say who sent it?" Emily shook her head. "No. I only saw the picture and the note," she said. Then Mark called and told me to come outside. He said he saw a suspect in the street and wanted to show me. I stepped outside and he was there. We argued. He shoved me. I fell. He said he was sorry, and then a neighbor called the ambulance. Her hands were small and shaking. I thought of the neighbor who had said someone saw Mark hand an envelope to them and ask them to leave it for Emily. Why would Mark give an envelope to a neighbor if he had given it to Emily himself? Why would he tell the neighbor to delay giving it until tomorrow? All of it twisted around in my head. The police came back to see me. They asked questions. "Did you see the envelope?" one officer asked. "Do you know anyone who would send something like that to her?" I told them everything I could. I described Mark's laugh, where he worked, the photograph I had found earlier. I showed them the bank printouts. I told them about the collection agent and the strange transfers. The officer wrote everything down and told me they would check camera footage from the street and talk with the neighbor who saw Mark. He promised to keep me informed. His voice was steady and official. I wanted to believe him like a child wants to believe a parent. After the officer left, Emily asked me for a pen. She wanted to write down what she remembered. She made a list in shaky handwriting. She wrote Mark's name, the time he came, the words he said, how the envelope looked. She wrote, "Did he make it? Did he plan it? Why would he make me read it?" Then she crossed out the last line, as if crossing words could erase the hurt. The days after were slow and full of small, quiet work. I sat with her through the afternoons. We watched birds and the way sun moved across the hospital window. I brought soup and sandwiches. I read to her simple stories about brave, small animals. I wanted to give her peace. She lay there with a small stack of letters and papers she had been given in the last few months from the bank and from Mark. She fingered them as if checking to see whether paper could be trusted again. Outside the hospital, the world moved like a river that never stopped. Sam, my friend who promised to trace the transfers, called with news. He had found something odd. Money had moved into an account that did not belong to Mark, at least not at first glance. It moved through a chain of small accounts and ended in a wedding shop in the city. The shop had a name and an address. Sam said he would go there the next day and see what he could find. I felt a tiny light of hope. "Maybe it's a mistake," Sam said in his quiet voice. "Maybe it's not what we think. But we will look. We will follow the money." I told Emily. Her eyes grew distant. She nodded like a person trying to collect herself. We took one small step at a time. I called the bank again and asked them to freeze any transfers connected with Mark's name. The bank said they needed a court order for some things, but they could flag the accounts. I felt like we were moving mountains with little arms. Then, one evening, something else happened. Emily received a visitor in the hospital. A young woman walked up to the visitor's desk and asked if she could see Emily Turner. She had a folder in her hand and she looked nervous. The nurse asked for ID and the woman showed a badge. She said she worked at the welfare office and that she had paperwork Emily might want to see. The nurse brought her up. The woman sat down and opened the folder. Inside were copies of documents, rental agreements, signatures, and a small stack of receipts. Emily and I leaned over the folder. The woman said she had been asked to deliver these papers to Emily because someone at the office thought they were important. She did not say who had asked. My hands went numb as I looked at the papers. There were signatures that looked like Emily's and power of attorney forms signed in a neat, practiced hand. There were transfer authorizations that gave access to accounts. The dates matched the times the money had gone out. My throat closed. "Who brought these to you?" I asked the woman. She shrugged. "I don't know their name," she said. "They left them with the receptionist and asked that they be given to Emily only. They left a small note that said, 'For Emily, truth before anything else.'" Emily's hands trembled as she took the papers. Her eyes blurred. "Who would do this?" she whispered. I looked at the woman. "Did you see who left them?" I asked again. "No," she said. "I'm sorry. I only know the receptionist said someone dropped them during her lunch break." She didn't see the face. We were surrounded by papers that looked like answers but felt like riddles. Someone wanted Emily to know, but why now? Who wanted the truth to be in her hand? Was it someone who wanted to help or someone who wanted to hurt? That night, back in the small chair by her bed, I thought of all the ways people hide things. I thought of the way Mark smiled and the way his hands moved when he reached for Emily. I thought of the neighbor who had seen him hand over an envelope and told a different story. I felt like a detective in a long story, stitching small clues together. The next morning a new thing came, a package left at the hospital entrance for me. There was no name on it. Inside was a small video player and a single USB stick. My hands shook when I put the stick into the hospital computer. The video showed a parking lot camera, a grainy look, and a man in a dark jacket placing an envelope on a doorstep. The camera angle showed the man's face for only a second. It was not a clear look, but the figure moved the way Mark moved when he reached for his hat. The video stopped. My stomach turned. I watched it again and again. It was not proof, only a small, shaking hint. I was learning that truth sometimes arrives in drips and crumbs. You must be patient and watch where the crumbs go. Then the extreme event that would end this chapter happened. On a gray afternoon, a woman appeared at the hospital with a newspaper clipping in her hand. She pushed through the doors like someone carrying news of a storm. She asked for Emily Turner. She folded the clipping like a prayer and handed it to me. It was a photograph of a woman I did not know, the same woman in the diner photo, and a headline that read, "Local charity lists donors, names hidden." The woman who gave me the clipping had tears in her eyes. She said, "I found this. I thought you should see it." She explained she worked at the charity and had been looking through old files when she found a receipt with Emily's name on it. On the receipt was a tiny notation that matched the handwriting on one of the transfer authorizations. I looked closer. The receipt had a name scribbled beside the donation. The name was familiar. It was my own. My hands dropped the paper. I stared at it until the letters blurred. My name printed on a receipt, a small donation under my name, and next to it, in a different hand, a code that matched the account where the missing money had ended. The woman who had given me the paper apologized and said she had no idea what it meant. I felt a cold come over me. My name on a receipt meant someone had used my name. Had they forged my name? Had they used it to mask where the money went? Had I been tricked into helping? I had thought myself careful. I had thought my life was small and honest. Now the paper said maybe I was part of a path I did not know I walked. The hospital light buzzed. Emily sat up slowly and stared at the paper in my hands. Her eyes were wide. She asked, "Mom, is that your handwriting?" I could not answer. My throat would not make the sound. I had a sudden, sharp feeling. Everything I had tried to hold together, my job, my promises to Emily, the small late nights, might be used by someone to hide the truth. And then, as if the world wanted to push me over the edge and not let me land, the nurse came in and whispered one sentence that made the air go thin. "There's someone at the desk asking to see Rachel Turner. He says he is from the bank and he has paperwork that needs your signature." My heart leapt and fell at the same time. A bank man at the hospital. Paperwork that needed my signature. The door opened and footsteps came closer. I stood slowly. My hands were not steady. Emily reached for me and tightened her grip. Outside the room, a tall man in a suit stood at the doorway with a folder. His face was unreadable. For a moment, the world stopped. I knew that opening the door would lead us into another set of questions. I knew that whatever was in that folder could be another key or another trap. I took a breath and walked toward the doorway. The man in the suit smiled and held out the folder. Inside, in big, black letters, was an order to freeze accounts, signed by a judge. It had my name on some pages and Emily's on others. My name, my handwriting, my life stamped in official ink. The man looked at me and said, "Someone is trying to clear their tracks. We need to talk." I felt my knees give. I thought of the envelope, the photo, the neighbor's story, the video, the receipts. I thought of Mark's smile and the way Emily had fainted. I thought of how fragile trust can be. As the man closed the folder and the hospital lights hummed, I understood that the path we were on was not only about money. It was about truth and the way people use names and love to hide secrets. It was about who you trust when trouble comes. And then, the man in the suit said one more thing, low and serious. "We found something else. A name that links to a file at the welfare office. It's not what we expected." His words hung like a cloud. I felt all my small, careful plans scatter like feathers. The chapter ends here with the folder open between us and a new, heavy name on a file, a name that makes my heart stop because it might be the last thing I want to hear. The nurse whispers that the police want to see me next. Emily squeezes my hand, and I know nothing will ever be simple again. The name Susan Parker rolled through my mind like thunder that refused to fade. My sister. The woman who raised me when our mother couldn't. The woman who stole money from me at 19. The woman who vanished after my divorce, leaving only one sentence on a torn piece of paper. Some people must break things to feel whole. I hadn't seen her since. And now her fingerprints were on my motel door. The police officer closed the folder and waited for me to breathe properly. My hand shook. My head spun. Every memory I thought time had buried clawed its way back up. "Mrs. Turner," the officer said gently, "we believe Susan may be involved in the forged accounts, or at least connected to the individuals who are." The hallway lights flickered above us. A nurse pushed a medicine cart by, wheels squeaking. Everything felt strangely slow, like the air had thickened. I swallowed hard. But how? She disappeared. Nobody could find her. Even when David left, she didn't come back. "That may be the point," he replied. "We think she's been operating under other identities for years. Susan may not even be her only name anymore." A cold wave crept down my arms. If that was true, then I didn't just fail to see the danger, I had lived in it my whole life. "What does she want?" I whispered. "We don't know yet," he answered. "But we do know someone is watching your movements. Someone who wants to stop you from uncovering who really stole your money." His words sat heavy in the air. We stepped into the elevator. The doors closed with a dull thud, trapping us in a small metal box that felt too still. My heartbeat thumped against my ribs. Susan. David. Mark. 3 names circling like vultures. But why would they be tied together? And if they were, who was controlling who? The officer tapped his radio. "Unit 4 heading to the motel for follow-up." I stared at my reflection in the metal door, tired eyes, trembling lips, a woman stretched between past and present. "Are you okay?" the officer asked. I lied. Yes. He didn't believe me, but he didn't push. The motel room was worse than Sam described. The door hung crooked on its hinges. The sheets were slashed with something sharp. My suitcase lay open on the floor, clothes scattered like fallen leaves. But the thing that made my stomach twist wasn't the vandalism. It was the smell. My perfume, the one I only wore on Emily's graduation, had been sprayed across the room. Heavy. Overwhelming. Deliberate. Someone wanted me to know they had stood inches from my belongings. Someone wanted me to feel their presence. A violation and a message wrapped into one. Sam stood in the corner, pale and shaky. He tried to offer a smile, but it wavered. "I didn't touch anything," he said quietly. "I waited for you." "Thank you," I whispered. The police entered behind us, gloved and careful. Cameras flashed. They lifted items gently with tweezers, searching for prints. One officer pointed to the bed. There, lying neatly on the pillow, was the note Sam had mentioned. "Stop looking." I stared at the letters. Each one thick, aggressive, and the curve of the S looked horribly familiar. "Is that Susan's handwriting?" Sam whispered beside me. "No," I murmured. "It's close, but not exact. More like someone trying to copy her style. Trying to scare me with a ghost from my own past." The officer bagged the note and stepped outside. I walked around the room slowly, eyes scanning the floor. Then I froze. On the carpet near the bathroom, almost hidden under the bed skirt, was a small silver bracelet. My breath hitched. I bent down and lifted it with shaking fingers. A single charm hung from it, a tiny engraved heart with the initials SB. My knees gave out and I sat on the edge of the bed, squeezing the bracelet until my fingers hurt. Sam knelt beside me. "Rachel, I'm so sorry." I stared at the bracelet. I hadn't seen it in 20 years. Susan wore it every day until the night she left. Why would she leave it here? Why reveal herself now? What did she gain from pulling me into this? The police officer returned. "Mrs. Turner, we need you to see something else." He handed me another evidence bag. Inside was a folded paper ripped at the edges. I opened it carefully. My heart stopped. It was a bank authorization form, signed with my name. But the handwriting wasn't mine. At the bottom, under the forged signature, was a line written in small, sharp handwriting. "For old time's sake." I felt the world tilt. Sam muttered, "Rachel, this is personal. Someone close is behind this." A knock at the open door made me look up. Another officer entered holding a tablet. "We found security footage from outside the motel," he said. My chest tightened. "Who was it?" He pressed play. The video showed a figure wearing a hoodie walking toward my door. Slender, not tall, moving with fast, nervous steps. The camera didn't catch her face, she kept looking down. But just before entering the room, she turned slightly. Enough to show a glimpse of her hair. Long, dark. The same shade Susan had when she left. "Could be her," the officer said. "But we can't be sure." I stared at the screen. The figure slipped into my room quickly, like she knew exactly where to go. Then, one more detail made my stomach twist. Behind the woman, several feet away, stood another person. A man. Tall. Wearing a cap. Watching her. Watching everything. The camera caught just enough of his jawline to make my heart lurch. David. It looked like David. My ex-husband. My daughter's father. Standing behind Susan. Watching her break into my room. My throat closed. Are they working together?" "We don't know yet," the officer said. "But they're connected." The room felt smaller now. Hotter. A knot tightened in my chest. Sam looked terrified. "Rachel, this is bigger than all of us." I nodded slowly. Because if Susan and David were together, if they were coordinating these fake accounts, if they had pulled Mark into their schemes, then Emily wasn't just betrayed by a boyfriend. She was pulled into a trap that started before she was even born. A trap built by her own family. I felt sick. The officer spoke again. "There's more. We traced the money from your savings. It was moved from the fake account and sent to a larger one under a hidden name." "What name?" I asked, barely able to speak. He hesitated, then said carefully, "Emily Turner." I froze. "No. That's impossible." She didn't know about any transfers. "We know," he said. It wasn't her who controlled the account. My stomach twisted. "Then who?" The officer interrupted. "Someone opened an account using her name months ago. Someone pretending to be her." A chill crawled up my spine. "Her identity was stolen?" Sam whispered. "Yes," the officer said. "Completely. And whoever stole it planned this for a long time." I grabbed the bedpost to steady myself. "Why would anyone do this to her?" I whispered. "She's my daughter. She's innocent." The officer looked at the scattered suitcase, the destroyed room, the forged papers. And he said, "We believe the target wasn't your money, it was your relationship." My heart dropped. Someone wants to destroy the bond between you and Emily. Piece by piece. My knees went weak. The officer put a gentle hand on my shoulder. And based on everything we've seen, that someone is connected to your family. The room felt like it was spinning. My ears rang. My vision blurred around the edges. Sam whispered, "Rachel, why would your own sister want to tear your life apart?" I couldn't answer, because I didn't know. But I knew the look in Susan's eyes the day she left, cold, sharp, and angry. And I remembered her last words. "One day, you'll understand what you took from me." The police stepped outside to make calls. Sam walked out to get some air. I sat alone on the broken motel bed, gripping the silver bracelet, my breath shallow, my hands trembling. Someone knocked softly on the half-open door. I lifted my head slowly. A woman stood there. The same woman in the red coat I had seen in the hospital hallway. She stepped inside, shut the door quietly, and whispered, "Rachel, listen to me. You're in danger. And your daughter, she's in more danger than you know." My heart raced. "Who are you?" I asked. She looked over her shoulder, terrified. "My name isn't important," she said. "But I know Susan. And I know David. And I know why they're doing this." My breath caught. She leaned closer and whispered, her voice trembling. "They're not working for themselves. They're working for someone else. Someone who wants the past to stay buried." My pulse thundered. "Who?" She shook her head. "I can't say it yet. But I can show you." She slipped an envelope into my hand. My stomach twisted. Another envelope. "Be careful," she whispered. "Once you open this, nothing in your life will look the same again." Before I could speak, footsteps echoed in the hallway. She panicked, slipped out the back door, and disappeared into the shadows. I stared at the envelope. My fingers trembled. Emily had fainted after opening one. Would I? I slid my thumb under the flap. And the chapter ends right there, with the envelope half open, the truth sitting inside, and the door behind me creaking softly as if someone or something was standing there watching me. The edge of the envelope sliced lightly against my thumb as I pulled it open slow, careful, afraid of what truth waited inside. My hand shook. My breath thinned. The motel room felt too still, like the world was holding its breath with me. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a photograph. I looked at the photograph first, and everything inside me froze. It was a picture of Susan and David, my sister and my ex-husband, standing together outside a courthouse. Not from years ago, but from 3 months earlier. Side by side. Smiling. Holding a stack of documents. On the back of the photograph, someone had written, "They never left each other. They left you." My heart slammed against my ribs. My knees went weak. I dropped onto the bed as though gravity had doubled. 3 months ago? That was around the time my savings started disappearing. Around the time Emily started feeling pressured. Around the time Mark entered her life. I swallowed hard and unfolded the paper. A marriage certificate. My hands trembled violently. Signed by David Turner and Susan Parker. Dated only weeks before Emily found the first strange withdrawal on her account. I gasped a sharp, painful sound. My throat tightened so much I could barely breathe. They married. My sister married my ex-husband. Quietly. Secretly. And together, they built this mess around me and Emily. The betrayal tasted metallic. But there was writing underneath, handwritten in rushed, messy ink. "This is only the beginning. Look at page 2. I flipped the paper. Another document was taped to the back. A bank statement. An account under the stolen name, Emily Turner. And the biggest transaction on the page, the one that made the room spin, was a transfer sent to Mark Hastings. The same Mark who had dated my daughter. My stomach lurched. Mark was being paid. Paid by Susan and David. Paid to get close to Emily. Paid to gain her trust. Paid to use her signatures. Paid to make her fall in love so she would lower her guard. Paid to ruin her. A cold wave ran up my spine. This wasn't random. This wasn't messy. This was a plan. A plan designed by people who should have protected her. I pressed the heel of my hand to my chest, trying to breathe. Why? Why would they target Emily? Why would they target me, after all these years? The answer came quietly in my mind, unwelcome and heavy. Money. Control. Old wounds. Revenge that fermented for 20 years. Before I could think more, the motel door creaked behind me. I turned sharply. The police officers were gone. Sam had stepped outside moments earlier. But someone was standing in the open doorway now. A tall figure. Face shadowed. My stomach twisted. "Who's there?" I whispered. The figure stepped into the light. And my blood ran cold. It was Mark. But not the charming, smooth-talking man Emily had once adored. This version of him looked frantic. His hair messy. Eyes bloodshot. Hands shaking. "Rachel," he said, voice hoarse. "You need to give me that envelope." My grip tightened on the paper instinctively. "How did you get out of custody?" I asked shakily. His laugh was bitter. "They didn't arrest me. They just questioned me. They don't have enough yet." He stepped closer. "Give me the envelope," he repeated. I stood slowly, backing toward the window. "Why? It's just truth, isn't it? You were paid. She loved you. You." "Stop," he snapped, his voice cracking. I didn't mean for any of this to go so far. I didn't know Susan and David were this deep. I just needed the money, Rachel. I just needed a way out. He ran a hand through his hair. "You don't understand what they're capable of." I swallowed. "Then explain it." He shook his head desperately. "They'll come after me if I talk. They'll come after you. They already." His words cut off as he glanced at the window. A flicker of fear flashed across his face. A deep, bone-level fear. "They're watching," he whispered. I stepped closer. "Who? Susan? David?" Mark shook his head slowly. "No," he whispered. "Someone worse." I felt the room shrink around me. Who is worse than the two of them teaming up to tear apart their own family? I whispered. Mark swallowed. His breath shook. Then he said a name I hadn't heard since childhood, a name our family rarely spoke aloud. "Evelyn Parker." My heart stopped. My mother. The woman who abandoned Susan and me. The woman who disappeared. The woman we believed dead. The woman whose last known address was a shelter in another state. My voice barely formed the word. "My mother." Mark nodded slowly. "She's alive. And she's the one behind everything." My pulse thundered. "No," I whispered. "Evelyn left us. She didn't care about anything." "She wouldn't." "She would," Mark interrupted. "She wants payback. She wants everything she lost. And she's using your sister and David to get it." My head spun. Evelyn. Alive. Pulling strings from the shadows. Susan, desperate for approval, desperate for love she never got, would do anything for her. David, weak, angry, looking for someone to blame, would be easy to pull into the web. And Emily. Emily was a pawn. A way to punish me for leaving the past behind while Evelyn couldn't. A way to make me suffer the same abandonment she once felt. My breath caught as the truth clicked painfully into place. "But why come after me now?" I whispered. Mark's voice cracked. "Because your name, your identity, your savings, they were the last pieces your mother needed to rebuild her own life. The one she thinks she deserved." I felt dizzy. My mother. My sister. My ex-husband. My daughter's boyfriend. All tangled in a net of secrets I never saw coming. Mark wiped his eyes. "Rachel, they're going to erase everything connected to you. They want Emily to blame you. They want you isolated. Broken. They're almost there." My throat tightened. "And you helped them." He dropped his head. "I did. And I'm sorry. I swear I'm sorry. But I can't stop it anymore." He stepped toward me again, and the fear in his eyes deepened. Suddenly, the motel door slammed open. A gust of cold air swept into the room. Mark's eyes widened with terror. "No," he whispered. No, she can't be here." But someone stepped into the doorway. A tall woman. Long dark coat. Face shadowed. A presence so heavy the air seemed to bend around her. Even before she stepped into the light, I knew the shape of that shadow. My knees buckled. Her voice was low, calm, and chillingly familiar. "Hello, Rachel." I felt my heart collapse inside my chest. It was my mother. Evelyn Parker. Alive. Watching. Waiting. And now standing 3 feet away from me, the puppet master behind everything. Mark stumbled backward. "I told you I didn't want to be part of this anymore." Evelyn raised her hand slightly. A small gesture. But Mark flinched like she had struck him. She stepped closer, her cold eyes flicking to the envelope in my hand. "I believe," she said, "that belongs to me." The tension snapped like a wire. The officers outside were too far to hear us yet. Sam had stepped around the corner. It was just me, my mother, and a trembling man who'd helped destroy my daughter's life. Evelyn stepped forward. I stepped back. And she smiled, the same cruel, quiet smile she used to give when I was a child and didn't clean a dish properly. This chapter ends right here on the moment she reached out her hand toward me and said, in a voice soft enough to freeze blood, "It's time you learn the truth about why I came back." For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. My mother, the woman I hadn't seen since I was a child, the woman who abandoned Susan and me, the woman I believed dead, stood only a few feet away. Her eyes were sharp and cold, the kind of cold that made people freeze without touching them. "Give me the envelope, Rachel," she said softly. "You've taken long enough to open your eyes." Mark stood behind her, trembling like a leaf caught between two storms. He didn't dare speak again. Evelyn stepped closer. Slow, smooth, confident. The way someone moves when they think they already own the room. I clutched the envelope tighter. "You stay away from Emily." She stopped, tilted her head, and gave a small, amused smile. "Is that what you think this is about?" she said. "Emily?" Every hair on my arm stood straight. "What else would it be about?" I whispered. Evelyn sighed, almost disappointed. "Rachel, you always were too simple. Too emotional. Too soft." She took one more step. "None of this was ever about Emily." My throat tightened. "Then what is it about?" Evelyn's eyes hardened. "You." A cold shiver ran down my spine. "This," she said, gesturing around the destroyed motel room, "is about what you took from me." My voice cracked. "I never took anything." "Yes, you did." Her words cut like glass. "You took the life I should have had. The life Susan was meant to have. The life we deserved." My heart pounded in my ears. "You left us. You abandoned your children. You walked away." Her jaw flexed, but her face did not break. "I left," she said calmly, "because you were chosen." Her eyes burned. "Not Susan. Not me. You." I stepped back, breath unsteady. "Chosen for what?" She chuckled, a small, cold laugh. "For the inheritance." My stomach nodded. "What inheritance?" "Our mothers. Your grandmothers." She folded her arms. "She left everything to you. Every cent. Every property. Every account. It was supposed to belong to your sister and me. But she gave it all to you." I blinked. My chest tightened. "That wasn't possible." "I never received anything," I whispered. "Nothing. She died when we were young." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "You think it was an accident? That all that money simply vanished?" She leaned closer. "No. Your grandmother left everything to you. To the good one. To the kind one. To the child who wouldn't break." Her voice twisted with poison. "But I never let you see it." The room spun. "You intercepted it?" I choked out. She nodded proudly. "Of course." I took the letters. I met with the lawyer. I signed your name. I collected every cent. My hands shook violently. "So you stole my inheritance," I whispered. She smiled. "That's the simple version. And now you want, what? More? Money?" "I don't want your money," Evelyn said calmly. "I want your suffering." My breath caught. "That's why I raised Susan to resent you. That's why I pushed David toward you. That's why I encouraged him to leave you when he did." Her voice hardened. "That's why Susan and David are mine now. Loyal. Devoted. Grateful." My pulse thundered. "You pushed David to leave?" I whispered. Evelyn smirked. "David was always weak. Easy to sway. I convinced him you were holding him back. That you were the reason he didn't have the life he wanted. He believed me like a child believes a bedtime story." My knees shook. I felt the truth slam into me like a wave. My mother destroyed my marriage long before it cracked. She poisoned David's mind. She planted doubt in Susan's heart. She stole my inheritance. And now she was dismantling my daughter's life, piece by piece, to finish the job. I swallowed hard. "Why Emily?" "She's innocent." Why drag her into your hatred? Evelyn's expression softened for the first time, but not with love. With calculation. Because Emily is your heart, she said quietly. And nothing destroys a woman more completely than watching the person she loves most fall apart. I clenched the envelope, fury shaking my entire body. But Evelyn wasn't finished. You built a new life, she said. A clean life. A patient life. A life without me. And you weren't supposed to. Her voice quivered with cold anger. You were supposed to crumble. Like I did. My chest tightened. You could have asked for help. You could have. I didn't want help, she snapped. I wanted justice. The room went still. Silent. Heavy. For a moment, I saw the truth in her eyes. Evelyn Parker wasn't just angry. She was broken. Twisted. Lost in her own bitterness so deeply that she built her entire life around destroying mine. But I wasn't the same scared child she walked away from. I stood taller. Your justice ends now, I said softly. Her expression hardened. Rachel, she whispered, you can't fight me. You're wrong. At that moment, a slow creak sounded behind us. We all turned. Standing in the doorway, covered in a hospital blanket, hair messy, face pale but awake, was Emily. Her voice cracked as she spoke. Grandma? My breath caught. Evelyn's face twisted in shock, then anger. Emily, she said, suddenly sweet, you shouldn't be out of bed. You don't understand. But Emily stepped forward on shaking legs. No, she whispered. I understand everything. Evelyn froze. Emily looked at me, tears filling her eyes. Mom. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. My chest tightened painfully. She turned to Evelyn. You, she said through tears, did all this to hurt her? Evelyn's voice cracked. Emily, sweetheart. No, Emily shouted, louder than I'd ever heard her. You hurt her. You lied to me. You used me. And I thought my mom betrayed me, when all this time, it was you. Evelyn's sweet mask vanished. Her voice dropped cold. You don't get to judge me. Emily wiped her tears, standing straighter. Yes, she said quietly. I do. Silence swallowed the room. The police officers burst in only seconds later, Sam behind them, and they stopped cold when they saw Evelyn. Ma'am, step away from them, one officer commanded. Evelyn lifted her chin, unafraid. You have no idea who you're dealing with. The officer replied firmly, we have enough evidence to detain you for identity theft, fraud, conspiracy, and forgery. Step back. Evelyn's jaw clenched. Susan appeared in the hallway then, breathless, pale, eyes wide, and behind her, David stood frozen like a deer in headlights. You betrayed me, Emily whispered, staring at all of them. Every one of you. Susan opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. David looked at the floor. Evelyn didn't move. The officers stepped forward. Mark backed away from all of them, shaking. And in that moment, with my daughter standing beside me, and the truth spread open like a wound, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Strength. A calm, heavy strength that came from surviving everything meant to break me. As the officers cuffed Evelyn, she looked at me with something cold and hollow in her eyes. You think this is over? She hissed. You think she knows everything? You're wrong. There are things she still doesn't know. Things you never told her. My skin prickled. What things? I whispered. Evelyn smirked, a cruel, twisted smirk. You'll find out when she does. The officers pulled her away. Susan cried quietly as they led her out too. David followed silently, broken and small. The room finally went quiet. Emily leaned against me, shaking. Mom. I didn't know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I wrapped my arms around her tight, steady, real. I know, baby, I whispered. I know. We stood there in the dim motel room, surrounded by broken things, stolen papers, and the ashes of secrets meant to destroy us. But we were still standing. Together. And this time, no one would tear us apart again.